Yo, did this homeless guy really just walk in here like he owns the place? The girl behind the counter said it loud, chin up, lips curled in disgust. Order or get out. An almond croissant, please, the man said quietly. The cashier barked a laugh. An almond croissant. You do not even know how to pronounce that. Get a plain roll and go sit on the pavement where you belong. Chloe looked at him. Dude looks like he slept in an alley. I bet that $20 bill is fake. 5 people in line. Not one opened their mouth. The man paid his cash, sat down at a corner table, took a bite of his pastry, and froze mid-bite. Not because of what they said. He had heard worse his whole life just for existing in rooms like this. He froze because of what they said next when they thought nobody was listening. Marcus Thorne built Lumina Bakehouse with his own hands. Not a corporate metaphor, his actual blistered hands. 25 years ago, as an immigrant with broken English, he pushed a creaky wooden cart through the freezing, snow-covered streets of Chicago. He was broke, exhausted, and stubborn enough to believe that a man with a cart and a good recipe could build something that lasted. He did. 1 cart became a corner bakery. 1 bakery became 10. 10 became 60. Lumina Bakehouse was now an artisanal empire stretching across the Midwest, famous for its golden crusts, its signature seasonal pastries, and the motto engraved in brass on every front door, the scent of warmth for every home. Marcus wrote that motto himself. He remembered being a young boy standing outside fancy bakeries, looking through the frosted glass at pastries he was never allowed to buy because of the dirt on his shoes. He promised himself that if he ever built his own bakery, no one would ever be left out in the cold. Now Marcus sat in a corner office on the 40th floor of a glass tower overlooking the Chicago skyline. A framed photo of his original wooden cart hung behind his mahogany desk. He had not touched a bag of flour or a rolling pin in 4 years. He had not walked into one of his own stores as anything other than a VIP on a scheduled tour. He did not think he needed to. Revenue was up 12%. The board of directors was thrilled. The investors were happy. Then his assistant walked in on a Monday morning and dropped a thick folder on his desk. "You need to read these," she said softly. "Right now." Inside were 42 printed customer reviews for the Chicago flagship, his original store, the very first location he had built with his life savings. The reviews were all from the last 6 months. Marcus read the first 3 and his chest tightened. "The girls at the counter treated me like a stray dog. I am a 60-year-old veteran. They laughed when I asked for a menu. I bought my kids here for a treat. The manager looked us up and down like we were carrying a disease. Hostile, elitist, and cruel. I left my food on the table and walked out." He kept reading. 42 reviews. 30 of them mentioned the exact same thing. Not the quality of the bread, not the prices of the coffee. The staff. The vicious way certain customers were treated while others were praised. The words repeated on the pages like a warning siren. Humiliated, unwelcome, disgusted, ignored. Marcus pulled up the internal data dashboard. The flagship store's customer satisfaction score was dead last out of 60 locations. The bakery he built first was now the worst. He picked up his phone and called his regional manager, a man named Julian. Julian had been running the Chicago district for 2 years. "Julian, I am looking at the customer reviews for the flagship," Marcus said. "Walk me through what is happening." Julian sighed, his voice smooth, practiced, and dripping with corporate deflection. "Marcus, with all due respect, people leave bad reviews when we run out of their favorite seasonal tart. It is just noise. My team is incredible. Chloe is a superstar manager. We are smashing our sales targets. Your customer satisfaction score is dead last. Sir, satisfaction is subjective. We are a premium brand now. We cannot control how people feel when they do not fit the aesthetic." Marcus paused. He recognized that tone immediately. It was the voice of a man who cared more about image than people. "I hear you, Julian," Marcus said quietly. He hung up the phone. That night, Marcus did not sleep. He drove to the flagship store alone and parked his car across the street in the shadows. Through the glowing glass windows, he watched his employees. He saw a young woman behind the register, ignoring a tired-looking construction worker for 3 full minutes, while she filmed a video on her phone. He watched the man eventually give up and walk out into the cold. Marcus gripped his steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. 60 locations, thousands of employees, and the one store that was supposed to represent his entire life's work was rotting from the inside out. The next morning, Marcus Thorne did something he had not done in decades. He dressed like a nobody. He put on a faded oversized jacket, an old beanie, and scuffed boots. He left his luxury watch on his dresser. He took the city bus, walking the last 3 blocks in the freezing wind to the Lumina Bakehouse flagship. He pushed the heavy door open. The brass bell chimed, and exactly as the reviews promised, the nightmare began. After buying his pastry and enduring the cashier's brutal insults, Marcus sat at the corner table. The almond croissant was incredible, the best thing he had tasted in years. But as he chewed, the 2 girls behind the counter kept talking, thinking the poor man in the corner was too deaf or too stupid to understand them. "I do not know why people like that even come in here," Chloe, the store manager, said, leaning against the espresso machine. "This is not a charity. Go to a gas station. He is just going to sit there for an hour, make the place look ugly, and ruin the vibe." The other girl laughed. "For real. Last week, some guy came in wearing dirty work boots. I told Julian if we do not start filtering these people out, our store is going to look like a soup kitchen." "Exactly," Chloe smirked. "We have to protect the brand aesthetic. If they do not look the part, make them wait. They will leave eventually." Marcus set his pastry down on the table. His hands were perfectly steady, but a cold fury ignited in his chest. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and typed one single word: rot. He stood up, left his pastry on the table, and walked out the door without looking back. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody noticed he left. Standing on the icy sidewalk, staring up at the motto he had written 25 years ago, Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called his chief operating officer. "Clear my schedule for the next 2 weeks," Marcus said. "All of it." "Marcus, you have the national board meeting on Thursday." "Cancel it. I am going back in, not as the CEO, not as the founder. I am going in as a night shift baker. And you are going to make sure not a single soul in this company knows my real name. If I fire 2 cashiers, I only fix the front door," Marcus told his chief operating officer over the phone. "I want to know how deep the rot goes. Set me up in the system. Make me Mark, the new night shift sanitation and prep worker. Transfer me from a warehouse out of state so nobody asks questions." There was a long silence on the line. "Marcus, you are a 60-year-old CEO. The night shift is brutal manual labor." "Do it," Marcus said. At 11 o'clock that night, Marcus stood in the freezing alley behind the Chicago flagship. The front of Lumina Bakehouse was a masterpiece of warm lighting and polished wood. The back employee entrance was a heavy metal door, covered in rust, completely ignored and decaying. It told him everything about where his company had focused its attention. He swiped his temporary key card and walked into the kitchen. The air smelled of sharp bleach and old yeast. A young Asian woman was already at the stainless steel prep tables. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her white apron was already dusted with a thick layer of flour. She did not look up when the door clicked shut. She was moving with the intense, unbroken rhythm of someone who had no time to waste. "You must be Mark, the new prep guy," she said, her voice tired but clear. "Sanitizer goes in the red buckets. Clean towels on the bottom shelf. Do not use the blue towels on the food stations, or everything will taste like industrial soap for a week." "Understood," Marcus said. "I am Mark, and you are—" "Maya," she replied, finally glancing up for half a second. "I am the night baker. We have 400 pastries to make before 6 in the morning, so grab a bucket." For the next 4 hours, Marcus scrubbed baking sheets, mopped the slippery tile floors, and watched Maya Lin work. Marcus had spent his youth in bakeries. He knew what a master looked like. Maya did not just bake, she orchestrated. She managed 3 massive industrial ovens at once, rolling out sheets of laminated dough, mixing heavy vats of almond paste, and perfectly timing the proofing of the yeast. Her hands moved with a practiced, beautiful precision. Every fold of dough was exact. Every measurement was flawless. At 3 in the morning, during a mandatory 15-minute break, Marcus sat on an overturned milk crate in the back room. Maya sat on the floor, leaning her head against the cold cinder block wall, rubbing her wrists. "You work fast," Marcus said quietly. "Where is the rest of the night crew?" Maya let out a short, hollow laugh. "There is no crew, Mark. It is just me." Marcus frowned. "This flagship does $5,000 in pastry sales every morning. The operations manual requires a minimum of 3 bakers for the overnight shift. Maya looked at him, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Julian, the regional manager, cut the night staff budget 6 months ago to boost his quarterly profit margins. He said one person was enough if they worked hard enough. If I complain, he fires me, and I cannot get fired. My mother is in a care facility. I need the health insurance. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He looked at the schedule pinned to the corkboard. Maya Lin was scheduled from 11 at night to 7 in the morning, 6 days a week, every single week. The dead zone. She received no customer tips, no daylight, and no recognition. She was carrying the entire production of the flagship store on her own shoulders. By 6 in the morning, the display cases in the front of the store were a work of art. Rows of perfectly golden croissants, delicate seasonal tarts, and towering cinnamon brioche breads. Maya had built a masterpiece in the dark. At 6:30, the front doors unlocked. The morning shift arrived. The temperature in the room changed the moment Chloe, the store manager, walked in. She was holding an iced coffee from a different cafe, wearing designer sneakers and talking loudly on her phone. 2 other day shift workers followed her, laughing and gossiping. Chloe did not say good morning to Maya. She did not thank her for the hundreds of pastries perfectly arranged in the cases. Instead, Chloe walked straight to the display, pulled out her phone, and turned on a portable ring light. Maya," Chloe whined, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at a row of fruit tarts. "The glaze on these is not shiny enough. You know I need them to pop on camera. Next time, do it right. I cannot have my store looking cheap." Maya said nothing. She just picked up a heavy tray of dirty mixing bowls and walked toward the back sinks. Chloe flipped her hair, smiled into her phone camera, and started recording. "Good morning, Chicago. We are up bright and early at Lumina Bakehouse, grinding hard to bring you the best pastries in the city. Just finished setting up these amazing tarts. Come get them while they are hot." Marcus stood by the mop bucket, his jaw tight. He watched Chloe take the credit for Maya's sweat and blistered hands. He watched the day staff lean against the counters, completely ignoring the exhausted girl scrubbing pots in the back. It was not just bad customer service. It was exploitation. Marcus walked into the tiny manager's office while Chloe was busy filming up front. He opened the computer and used his backdoor corporate credentials to check the payroll system. He looked at Maya Lin's salary. She was making the exact same hourly wage she made the day she was hired 3 years ago. 0 raises, 0 overtime pay, despite clearly working through her breaks. Then he checked Chloe's compensation. Chloe was receiving a massive quarterly bonus based on pastry sales. Sales generated entirely by the girl she had just insulted. Marcus closed the computer. The bakery was not just rotting. It was feeding off the people at the bottom to make the people at the top look good. He put his gloves back on and walked back out to the floor. It was time to find out exactly how much they were stealing. It was 3 a.m. on Wednesday, the dead middle of Marcus Thorne's third night shift. The flagship kitchen was silent, except for the heavy rhythmic thumping of the commercial dough mixer and the low hum of the exhaust fans. Marcus stood shoulder to shoulder with Maya at the long steel prep table. A mountain of pale elastic dough lay between them. For the first time in years, Marcus buried his hands deeply into the flour. The cool, soft resistance of the yeast beneath his palms sent a rush of memories through him. He remembered the cramped, freezing garage where he first learned to bake the smell of rising bread that used to be his only comfort. He was a CEO, a billionaire on paper. But in this room, with the flour dusting his forearms, he remembered who he truly was: a baker. Maya stopped rolling her pastry dough and watched him. Her exhausted eyes narrowed slightly in the harsh, fluorescent light. "You have done this before, Mark. You do not handle dough like a cleaner." Marcus kept his eyes on the dough, folding it with deliberate, gentle pressure. "A long time ago, in a different life, I used to think baking was magic." Maya smiled, a small, sad curve of her lips. "It is magic, until they turn it into a quota." She walked over to her canvas tote bag, resting on a flour sack in the corner. She pulled out a small, worn leather notebook with a frayed elastic band. The edges of the pages were stained with butter and vanilla extract. She set it on the safe, dry edge of the prep table and flipped it open. "We are running low on the standard glaze," Maya said, scanning a page filled with neat, cramped handwriting. "I am going to mix a batch of the spiced brown butter instead. It holds up better in the display cases anyway." Marcus glanced over at the open notebook. His heart skipped a beat. He stopped kneading. He stepped closer, staring at the pages. The handwriting was meticulous. Detailed recipes, flavor profiles, and hand-drawn sketches of pastries filled every inch of the paper. He recognized the heading on the left page immediately. The Autumn Maple Croissant. "You wrote this?" Marcus asked, his voice low. Maya nodded, not looking up as she measured out brown sugar. "Yeah, I was messing around with flavors last September. Wrote it down so I would not forget the ratios." Marcus stared at the book. The Autumn Maple Croissant was Lumina Bakehouse's #1 selling seasonal item. It had driven a massive spike in fourth-quarter revenue. The corporate announcement had credited Julian, the regional manager, for its creation. "And this one," Marcus pointed to the opposite page, "the Salted Caramel Brioche Crown, another massive bestseller." "Mine too," Maya said quietly. She flipped a few more pages. "The Lemon Lavender Tart, the Winter Spiced Loaf, the Honey Pecan Roll." Page after page of Lumina Bakehouse's most profitable, critically acclaimed signature pastries, all of them sketched out in pencil by an exhausted night shift worker making minimum wage. "Maya," Marcus said, keeping his tone carefully steady, "these are the company's top signature items. I read the corporate newsletters. Julian got the credit for all of these. He got promoted because of these." Maya stopped measuring. She put the measuring cup down, her shoulders sagging. The brief spark of pride in her eyes faded into a heavy, dark resignation. "I know Mark." "Then why do you let him take them? Why do you not go to HR? Why do you not put your name on your own work?" Maya let out a bitter sigh and leaned against the cold steel table. "Because I tried. Last year, when Julian submitted the Maple Croissant as his own, I sent an email to the corporate office. I attached pictures of this notebook. I asked for a meeting." "And what happened?" "Julian pulled me into the back office the next day," she said, looking down at her flour-covered shoes. "He told me that menu development is a regional management function. He said anything I create on company property belongs to him. And then he told me that if I ever tried to go over his head again, he would fire me for insubordination and make sure no bakery in Chicago ever hired me." Marcus felt the heat rising in his blood. A regional manager threatening a frontline worker. A coward stealing the brilliance of someone who could not fight back. "Mark, I cannot lose this job." Maya continued, her voice cracking just a little. "My mom has stage 3 kidney disease. The medical bills are drowning us. The insurance from this job is the only thing keeping her treatments going. Julian knows that. He knows I am trapped, so I keep my head down, I bake the bread, and I let him take the credit. It is just the way the world works." "No," Marcus said. The word came out sharper and harder than he intended. Maya looked up, startled by the sheer authority in the old cleaner's voice. Marcus softened his face, but the fire in his eyes remained. He looked at the worn leather notebook, a physical record of stolen genius. Then he looked at Maya, a young woman with blistered hands carrying the weight of a multi-million-dollar empire on her shoulders. "It is not the way the world works, Maya," Marcus said quietly. "It is just the way broken men operate when nobody is watching them." He wiped the flour from his hands, pulled out his phone under the table, and discreetly snapped 3 crystal-clear photos of the open notebook pages. The dates on Maya's recipes were months before Julian's official submissions. Marcus watched her pipe the filling into the croissants. Her precision was breathtaking. She was not just making food, she was creating art. And every morning that art was handed over to people who despised her, sold to line the pockets of a man who threatened her livelihood. "How many recipes do you have in that book, Maya?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence again. She paused, wiping her forehead with the back of her wrist. 52. I try to write a new one every week. Sometimes flavors just pop into my head when I am trying to stay awake at 4 in the morning. 52 original recipes, a masterclass in pastry arts buried in a greasy tote bag hidden away in a dark kitchen. Marcus thought about the elite product development team sitting in the corporate headquarters struggling to come up with concepts half as good as the ones Maya jotted down in pencil. "You have a gift," Marcus told her. "A real gift. Do not ever let anyone convince you that your talent belongs to them. Not a manager, not a boss, not even the CEO of this company." Maya smiled a genuine warm smile that reached her tired eyes. "Thanks, Mark. You are a weird guy for a cleaner, but you are all right. I have been called worse." Marcus chuckled softly. He turned back to the dough, his hands moving with the practiced rhythm of his youth. The anger in his chest was crystallizing into something cold and sharp. The evidence was secured. The motive was clear. The trap was set. All he needed now was for the architects of this misery to step right into it. and he knew exactly when that would happen. The morning shift was only a few hours away. At 6:30 in the morning, the heavy brass locks on the front doors clicked open. The warm, golden light of Lumina Bakehouse spilled out onto the freezing Chicago pavement. From the back kitchen, Marcus watched the transition. It was like watching a play where the stagehands did all the heavy lifting in the dark, only for the diva to step into the spotlight and take the applause. Chloe strutted through the front doors at exactly 6:35. She did not wear an apron. Instead, she wore a tailored beige blazer and expensive leather boots. She tossed her designer handbag onto the employee break table, nearly knocking over Maya's worn canvas tote bag. "Music up!" Chloe snapped at the day shift cashier. "And turn the lights up in the display cases. It looks dead in here." She did not look at Maya. She did not look at Marcus, who was quietly mopping the floor near the espresso machines. To Chloe, the night crew were ghosts. They only mattered if they made a mistake. By 7 in the morning, the morning rush had begun. Marcus stood in the corner, leaning on his mop, watching his flagship store operate. A young couple walked in. They were dressed in high-end winter coats, laughing loudly. Chloe immediately rushed to the register, pushing the cashier aside. "Oh my gosh, hi guys." Chloe beamed her voice a pitch higher. "I love your scarf. Is that cashmere? What can we get started for you today?" She handed them their coffees with both hands, smiling brightly, wishing them a beautiful morning. This was the Lumina Bakehouse experience Marcus had designed. This was the warmth he had promised. Then the brass bell above the door chimed again. An older man walked in. He was in his late 60s, his shoulders slightly stooped. He wore a faded olive green military jacket, the fabric frayed at the cuffs. His boots were clean but scuffed from years of hard wear. He took off his old cap and held it in his hands, looking at the glowing pastry case with quiet admiration. Marcus watched Chloe's smile vanish. It did not just fade. It snapped shut like a steel trap. The older man walked up to the register. "Good morning," he said, his voice raspy but polite. "Could I please get a black coffee and one of those maple croissants?" Chloe did not look him in the eye. She stared past his shoulder, her face completely blank. "We are out of the maple." Marcus frowned. He knew for a fact there were 3 dozen maple croissants sitting right behind the glass, less than 2 feet from Chloe's hand. Maya had just baked them. The older man looked confused. He pointed gently at the case. "Oh, I see some right there on the middle shelf." Chloe sighed a loud, exaggerated sound of annoyance. "Those are reserved for mobile orders. Like I said, we are out. Do you want the coffee or not?" The man blinked, taken aback by the hostility. "Just the coffee then, please." "Name." "Arthur." Chloe punched the screen. She did not tell him the total. She just tapped the card reader with her polished fingernail. Arthur paid and moved to the pickup counter. He waited. 3 more customers walked in. Young, well-dressed professionals. Chloe took their orders immediately. She laughed with them. She handed them their complicated espresso drinks and their maple croissants from the exact same shelf she had just told Arthur was reserved. Arthur stood at the edge of the counter, watching this happen. He did not say a word, but Marcus saw the look in the old man's eyes. It was the look of someone who was used to being pushed out of the way, someone who had accepted that the world no longer had a place for him. 10 minutes passed. Arthur was still waiting for a simple cup of black coffee. Marcus could not take it anymore. He dropped his mop, walked behind the counter, grabbed a paper cup, and poured the black coffee himself. He walked over to the pickup counter and handed it to Arthur. "Sorry for the wait, sir," Marcus said quietly. Arthur looked at the man in the faded cleaner uniform. He offered a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, son. Have a good day." Arthur walked out into the cold. Marcus watched him go, feeling a sickening knot in his stomach. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a system. Chloe turned and glared at Marcus. "Hey, prep guys, stay in the back. Do not touch my counter." "He was waiting 10 minutes for a drip coffee," Marcus said, keeping his voice carefully level. "He ruins the aesthetic," Chloe snapped back, lowering her voice so the customers could not hear. "If you serve people like that too fast, they think they can come back every day and hang around. We do not want his kind in here. Read the room, Mark." She turned on her heel and walked into the back office to take a phone call. Marcus stood frozen behind the register, read the room. He looked down at the counter. Next to the point-of-sale monitor, partially hidden under a stack of napkins, he saw a bright pink piece of thick paper. Marcus glanced around. The cashier was busy steaming milk. Marcus slid the napkins aside and pulled the pink paper out. It was a laminated card. Written across the top in Chloe's neat, bubbly handwriting were the words "Aesthetic Guidelines." Marcus read the card, and the blood roaring in his ears drowned out the sound of the cafe. The card was divided into 2 columns. Column 1 was labeled the Target Vibe. Underneath were bullet points: young professionals, influencers, people wearing designer brands, always offer free upgrades, always smile. Column 2 was labeled the Excluded List. Marcus read the bullet points, feeling physically sick. Elderly people who sit too long, construction workers in dirty clothes, homeless-looking individuals, anyone who looks low income. Beneath the list written in thick black ink was the directive that broke Marcus Thorne's heart. Action plan for the Excluded List. Do not make eye contact. Do not use their names. Claim popular items are sold out. Delay their orders by at least 10 minutes. Make them feel invisible so they do not come back. Protect the brand. Marcus stared at the laminated card. Protect the brand. They were using his company name to build a fortress of cruelty. They had taken the bakery he built for everyone and turned it into an exclusive club where the price of admission was youth money and arrogance. He thought about his mother. He thought about the fancy bakery she could never afford to take him inside. He had built Lumina Bakehouse to destroy that exact kind of snobbery. And now the monster he hated was living inside his own house. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket. He snapped a clear photograph of the front of the card and then flipped it over and took a picture of the back. He slid the card back under the napkins exactly where he found it. He walked back to his mop bucket. His hands were shaking not from fear, but from a cold, absolute rage. He did not just want to fire Chloe anymore. He wanted to tear her entirely corrupt kingdom to the ground, and he was going to start at the very top. At 9 in the morning rush began to slow, leaving the cafe humming with the quiet chatter of well-dressed professionals. Then a sleek, black luxury sedan parked illegally in the loading zone right outside the front windows. The brass door chimed, and the entire atmosphere of the bakery shifted. The warm, comforting aroma of toasted butter and caramelized sugar was instantly violently overpowered by the sharp metallic scent of expensive designer cologne. Marcus kept his head down, wiping a table near the front window with a rag, but his eyes followed the new arrival. The man who walked in looked like he belonged on the cover of a corporate finance magazine, not inside a bakery. He wore a tailored navy blue suit that cost more than a night shift Baker made in 3 months. His hair was slicked back with perfect, unmoving precision. He walked with his chest puffed out, carrying a slim leather briefcase, looking at the display cases not with love for the food, but with the cold calculation of someone counting money. This was Julian, the regional director of the Midwest Division, the rising star of Lumina Bakehouse Corporate. Chloe, who had been lazily scrolling on her phone behind the counter, instantly stood up straight. A massive, genuine smile broke across her face. She did not just look respectful, she looked familiar. Julian walked right past the line of waiting customers, stepped behind the counter, and gave Chloe a quick, one-armed hug. "Place looks decent, Chloe," Julian said, his voice loud enough for the customers to hear. "Keep those display cases full. We have to maintain the premium visual." "Always Julian," Chloe beamed. "I saved you a fresh espresso and the best table in the corner." Julian nodded, taking the coffee without saying thank you. He walked over to the corner table right next to where Marcus was pretending to scrub the floor. Julian opened his laptop, adjusted his designer tie, and clicked into a video conference call. Marcus kept his head down, moving his mop, slowly listening to every single word. "Good morning, marketing team," Julian said to his screen, his voice suddenly transforming into a warm, charismatic hum. "Thanks for jumping on the call. I want to walk you through my final concept for the National Fall Menu rollout." Julian reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a perfect golden autumn maple croissant. He held it up to the laptop camera like a trophy. "I spent the last 3 weekends locked in the test kitchen, playing around with seasonal profiles." Julian lied, not blinking once. "I wanted something that hits the nostalgia of autumn but keeps our premium, elevated brand identity." Marcus stopped mopping. He gripped the wooden handle so tightly, his joints ached. "The secret," Julian continued smoothly to the corporate executives on the screen, "is in the glaze. I used a brown butter base infused with toasted cardamom to balance the heavy sweetness of the maple, and right before it sets a tiny pinch of smoked sea salt on the top crest. It cuts through the fat of the laminated dough perfectly." A cold shock ran down Marcus's spine. Brown butter base, toasted cardamom, smoked sea salt on the top crest. Those were not corporate marketing buzzwords. Those were the exact handwritten words Marcus had read inside Maya's grease-stained leather notebook just 5 hours ago. Word for absolute word. Julian had not spent a single second in a test kitchen. He had simply copied a desperate, exhausted girl's diary and read it to the executives as his own genius. "Brilliant work, Julian," a voice from the laptop crackled. "The board is going to love this. You are a lock for the vice president of product spot next quarter." "Just doing my job to elevate the brand," Julian smiled humbly. Just then, the heavy metal door to the back kitchen swung open. Maya stepped out onto the cafe floor. Her shift was supposed to end 2 hours ago, but she was still there, carrying a heavy plastic crate of empty milk jugs to the recycling bin near the front door. She looked completely drained. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of the crate. Her white apron was covered in dark streaks of chocolate and thick layers of white flour, and she had dark circles under her eyes. Julian looked up from his laptop. The charismatic smile instantly vanished, replaced by a look of profound disgust. He quickly muted his laptop microphone and slammed his hand on the table. "Maya," Julian snapped. His voice was quiet, but sharp, like a razor. Maya stopped in her tracks, nearly dropping the heavy crate. She looked at him, her eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. "Yes, Mr. Julian." "What are you doing out here on the main floor?" Julian demanded, looking her up and down as if she were a rat that had crawled out of the sewer. "I was just taking the overnight recycling out to the front curb," she stammered softly. "The back alley bin is completely full." Julian stood up, towering over her. "Look at yourself. You look like a vagrant. You are covered in filth. We have high-end clients sitting in this cafe paying $7 for a coffee, and you are dragging trash through the dining room, looking like you sleep under a bridge. You are ruining the aesthetic." Maya swallowed hard, looking down at her flour-stained shoes. "I am sorry. I just finished the morning bake. I made the maple croissants." "I do not care what you made," Julian hissed, stepping closer to her. He did not lower his voice enough. Marcus could hear every cruel syllable. "Your job is to stay in the dark where nobody has to look at you. Do not ever walk onto my cafe floor looking like this again. Use the back door. If the bin is full, take the trash home with you. Do you understand me?" Maya's bottom lip trembled slightly, but she bit it down. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir. I understand." She turned around, dragging the heavy crate back into the kitchen, retreating into the shadows where they wanted her to stay. Julian sat back down, smoothed his expensive tie, unmuted his microphone, and put the charismatic smile back on his face. "Sorry about that team. Just handling some low-level maintenance issues. Back to the presentation." Marcus stood perfectly still in the corner. He looked at Julian. He looked at Chloe, who was watching the whole exchange from the register with a satisfied smirk. They were not just stealing from Maya. They were breaking her spirit on purpose, keeping her so beaten down and terrified that she would never dare to speak up. It was a perfectly designed machine of abuse. Marcus picked up his mop bucket. He had heard enough. He had seen enough. The rage inside him was no longer hot and chaotic. It had cooled into something heavy, precise, and absolute. Julian wanted a promotion. Chloe wanted an exclusive club. Marcus was going to give them both exactly what they deserved. But first, he needed the paper trail. He needed the digital proof that would trap them so completely they would never work in this industry again. And he knew exactly where to find it. He just had to wait for them to go to lunch. At exactly noon, the lunch rush faded. Julian and Chloe left the bakery together, laughing loudly as they walked out the front doors, heading to an expensive sushi restaurant down the street. The daytime cashiers were busy up front, wiping the counters and gossiping. Maya had finally gone home to care for her sick mother. Marcus was completely alone in the back hallway. He set his mop against the wall. He opened the door to the manager office and stepped inside, shutting it silently behind him. The room smelled of Chloe's expensive perfume and stale espresso. Marcus sat down in the leather desk chair. The computer monitor was asleep. He touched the mouse, and the password screen popped up. Marcus did not try to guess Chloe's password. He did not need to. He pulled out his phone, opened a secure corporate application, and generated a one-time executive override code. He typed the 12-digit string into the username bar. The system bypassed the local lock, instantly granting him absolute unfiltered access to the entire Lumina Bakehouse internal network. He started with the Human Resources database. He typed Maya Lin into the search bar. The screen loaded her employee profile. Marcus scrolled down to the formal grievance section. His jaw tightened. There were 3 formal complaints filed by Maya over the past 18 months. Complaint number 1. Filed 14 months ago, Maya reported being scheduled for 6 consecutive night shifts, a week for months on end, asking for a fair rotation. The status was marked as resolved. The administrative notes read, "Employee lacks daylight customer service skills. Schedule remains unchanged." It was signed by Julian. Complaint number 2. Filed 8 months ago. Maya requested a review of her pay, stating her massive overnight baking volume entitled her to the quarterly production bonus. The status was marked as resolved. The notes read, "Bonuses are discretionary based on total store aesthetic and front-facing impact, not backroom labor." Signed by Julian. Complaint number 3. Filed exactly 3 months ago. Maya submitted photographic evidence of her notebook, claiming the new summer menu items were her original creations, not Julian's. The status was marked as resolved. The notes read, "Employee is severely confused about corporate ownership of intellectual property. A verbal warning was issued for insubordination." Signed by Julian. 3 desperate cries for help. 3 heavy doors slammed in her face by the exact same man. Marcus closed the Human Resources tab and opened the flagship store financial ledger. He wanted to know where that production bonus money actually went. Lumina Bakehouse Corporate allocated a very generous bonus pool to each store that exceeded its quarterly sales targets. The Chicago flagship was crushing its target specifically because of the pastries Maya baked while everyone else was sleeping. Marcus pulled up the quarterly payout sheet. He ran his finger down the glowing screen. $0 went to the night shift. $0 went to the prep team. Instead, the entire bonus pool, nearly $12,000 every 3 months, had been manually redirected in the system. It was recoded as an administrative excellence bonus and split 3 ways. 60% went directly into Chloe's paycheck. The remaining 40% was split between the 2-day shift cashiers who stood around filming videos all morning. They were literally stealing the money. Maya bled to create, using it to fund their designer boots, their expensive lunches, and their luxury lifestyles, while Maya's mother struggled to pay for kidney treatments. Marcus leaned back in the squeaky chair. He needed the final piece of the puzzle. Why was Julian, a high-ranking regional director with 10 massive stores under his command, so fiercely protective of this specific store manager? Why did he let Chloe get away with turning a flagship bakery into a hostile, exclusive country club? Marcus opened Chloe's original employment file. He scrolled past her resume, past her direct deposit information, down to her emergency contact details. There it was. Emergency contact, Julian Vance, relationship, cousin. Marcus let out a slow, heavy breath. The final ugly piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Nepotism. Julian was shielding his younger cousin. He placed her in the most prestigious, highest-earning store in the district. When Maya complained, Julian buried the paperwork to protect Chloe. When the store made record profits off Maya's stolen recipes, Julian funneled the bonus money directly to his cousin's bank account and took the recipe credit for himself to secure a corporate promotion. It was a closed loop of corruption, a machine perfectly designed to crush the quiet, hardworking people at the bottom to elevate the arrogant people at the top. Marcus pulled out his phone. He did not take pictures of the screen this time. He did not need to. He downloaded the entire digital file folder, encrypting it, and sending it directly to his chief operating officer at the corporate headquarters. He typed a single message to his second-in-command. "I have everything I need. Have the legal team draft the termination papers for Julian Vance and Chloe. 3 counts of wage theft, intellectual property fraud, and gross violation of company ethics. Call the security team. Lock down the Chicago flagship store tomorrow morning at 7. Nobody gets in, nobody gets out." The reply came back 30 seconds later. "Consider it done, Marcus." Marcus locked the computer, stood up, and walked out of the office. The paper trail was secured. The trap was fully loaded. All that was left was to drop the match. And as Marcus picked his mop back up, listening to the chime of the front door, as Chloe returned from her expensive sushi lunch, he knew exactly how he was going to do it. Thursday morning arrived with a bitter, biting cold. The bakery was absolutely packed with the morning rush. Maya had been ordered by Julian to stay 4 hours past the end of her brutal overnight shift. Her assignment was to prepare a massive, intricate centerpiece display for a local food magazine photographer who was scheduled to arrive at noon. She was dead on her feet, running on 20 hours of no sleep, her hands cramping and her back aching with every step. Marcus watched from the shadowy corner by the espresso machines as Maya carefully carried the massive silver tray out from the kitchen. It was a breathtaking masterpiece, a 3-tier arrangement of spun sugar, delicate winter berry tarts, and golden, perfectly laminated croissants, arranged in a beautiful flowing cascade. It was a true work of art that only someone with immense passion and talent could create. Maya carried it as if it were fragile glass, her arms trembling slightly from the sheer weight of the tray. She placed it gently on the center display table in the middle of the dining room. Chloe immediately swooped in, holding her phone high in the air. "Everyone move back!" Chloe ordered the waiting customers, waving her manicured hand dismissively. "I need the lighting right for this video. Nobody step into the frame." Just then, the heavy brass front door chimed. A young boy, perhaps 7 years old, walked into the store holding his mother's hand. The boy was wearing a faded winter coat that was far too thin for the harsh Chicago weather. The mother looked deeply exhausted, clutching a small handful of crumpled $1 bills and loose coins. They were clearly not there to buy a fancy artisan pastry. They just wanted a simple hot drink and a few minutes of warmth away from the freezing wind outside. The little boy, distracted by the glowing lights and the massive, beautiful pastry display, stepped just a little too close to the center table. His small shoulder lightly bumped the edge of the wood. The table wobbled. A single winter berry tart slid off the edge of the heavy silver tray. It hit the tile floor with a soft, wet sound breaking apart. The entire bakery went completely dead silent. The low murmur of the morning crowd stopped instantly. Chloe lowered her phone. Her face twisted into a mask of pure, unhinged fury. She looked down at the smashed tart, then glared at the terrified little boy, and finally turned her venomous gaze to the mother. "Are you entirely blind?" Chloe screamed, her voice echoing sharply off the glass walls. "Do you have any idea how much this costs? This is a premium establishment, not a public warming shelter for people who cannot even afford to buy a bottle of water here." The mother quickly pulled her son behind her legs, her face flushing bright red with deep, burning humiliation. "I am so sorry," the mother whispered, her voice shaking violently. "He just slipped on the wet floor. I will pay for it. Please, I only have $4, but I will give it to you." Chloe laughed. It was a sharp, cruel sound that made Marcus feel sick to his stomach. $4, that artisan tart is $9. But it does not matter now. The whole display is completely ruined. The aesthetic is compromised because your filthy coats brushed against the table. Chloe turned to Maya, who was standing completely frozen by the front register. Maya's eyes were wide, watching the masterpiece she had spent 5 agonizing hours building, being treated like garbage. "Maya," Chloe snapped loudly, "this entire batch is contaminated. Throw it all out right now." Maya gasped, her flour-stained hands flying to cover her mouth. "Chloe, please. It is just one single tart. The rest of the display is perfectly fine. It took me all night to weave that spun sugar. Please do not throw it away." Chloe walked slowly over to the display table. She looked Maya dead in the eye, playing the role of a cold, calculating dictator, asserting her absolute power over someone she knew could not fight back. "I said it is ruined," Chloe whispered maliciously. Without breaking eye contact with Maya, Chloe grabbed the edge of the heavy silver tray with both hands and violently shoved it off the table. The crash was deafening. Dozens of perfect tarts, hours of meticulous back-breaking labor, and delicate woven sugar shattered across the hard tile floor. A beautiful golden masterpiece was instantly reduced to a sticky, destroyed mess of cream and crumbs. Several customers gasped in shock. The humiliated mother covered her young son's eyes and quickly rushed out of the store, disappearing back into the freezing cold without looking back. Maya fell to her knees. She did not yell. She did not scream or argue. The fight had been completely beaten out of her over the last 3 years. She just knelt on the hard tile floor, surrounded by the ruined pieces of her art, and she began to cry. Silent, heavy tears dropped from her chin as she reached out with shaking, exhausted hands to pick up the broken pieces of pastry. "Clean it up," Chloe said, stepping right over the mess in her expensive leather boots. "And then get back in the dark kitchen and make it all again before the magazine photographer gets here. You are not clocking out until it is flawless. Marcus Thorne stopped mopping. He dropped the heavy wooden handle. It hit the floor with a loud, sharp crack that made Chloe flinch and turn around. Marcus did not say a single word. He walked straight through the cafe, his heavy work boots crunching loudly over the broken pastry. He ignored Chloe entirely. He stopped right in front of Maya. He knelt down beside her on the floor. He reached out and gently placed his large, calloused hand over her trembling fingers, physically stopping her from cleaning up the mess. "Stop," Marcus said softly, his voice full of a warm, deep authority. "You do not have to clean this up, Maya. Never again." Maya looked up at him, her face wet with tears, completely confused by the sudden change in the quiet cleaner's demeanor. Marcus stood up. He did not look at Chloe, who was staring at him in shock. He did not look at the wealthy customers who had stood by and watched the cruelty happen without saying a word. He turned around and walked straight out the heavy brass front doors, stepping into the freezing Chicago wind. He pulled his cell phone from his faded jacket pocket. His hands were no longer shaking. His heart was beating with a slow, terrifying calm. The time for gathering evidence was over. The time for hiding in the shadows was done. He dialed his chief operating officer at the corporate headquarters. The man answered on the very first ring. "Marcus, is everything all right?" "Call the legal team," Marcus said, his voice as cold and hard as polished steel. "Call the corporate security department. Tell them to meet me at the Chicago flagship store tomorrow morning at 7 sharp. Bring the termination paperwork." Shutting the flagship down, Marcus, it is a Friday. The morning rush brings in $20,000. "I do not care about the money," Marcus replied, staring through the glass at the broken girl on the floor. "I am going to tear this castle down to the foundation, and I am going to make sure the monsters who built it never find a place to hide again." He hung up the phone. Tomorrow the shadows were going to vanish, and the fire was going to burn. Friday morning arrived with an unnatural quiet over the Chicago flagship store. It was 7 in the morning, the exact time the bakery should have been packed, with a line of wealthy customers stretching out the door. Instead, the heavy brass doors were locked shut. The open sign was turned off. Standing directly outside the glass windows were 2 men in dark corporate security suits, their arms crossed, turning every single confused customer away. Inside the bakery, the atmosphere was thick with tension and confusion. All 20 employees of the flagship location had been ordered into the windowless back prep room for an emergency mandatory staff meeting. There were no chairs, so people leaned against the massive stainless steel ovens and the bags of flour. Julian, the regional director, was pacing back and forth at the front of the room. He wore a sharp gray suit and a silver watch that caught the harsh fluorescent light. He was furious. Corporate had triggered an emergency store lockdown, and nobody had told him why. As the head of the entire Midwest district, he felt this was a massive insult to his authority. Chloe stood next to him, leaning against a prep table, checking her reflection in the screen of her phone. She looked annoyed, not worried. She sighed loudly. "Julian, do you have any idea how much money we are losing right now? The morning rush is our biggest aesthetic window. Whoever at corporate called this stupid meeting is completely clueless." "I will handle corporate, Chloe," Julian snapped, adjusting his expensive tie. "Somebody in the home office probably overreacted to a minor health code violation. I will make a few calls, throw a junior manager under the bus, and we will be open by 8. Sitting on an overturned milk crate in the very back corner of the room, completely hidden behind the day shift staff, was Maya. She was still wearing her flour-stained apron from the brutal overnight shift. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying the day before. She stared down at her hands, convinced that this meeting was about her. She assumed Chloe had finally reported her for insubordination over the dropped pastry tray, and that Julian was here to publicly fire her. She braced herself for the end. At exactly 7:05, the heavy metal door to the back alley opened. Everyone turned their heads. Marcus walked into the room. He was not wearing a tailored suit. He was not flanked by his legal team. He walked in completely alone, wearing the exact same faded winter jacket, the same cheap beanie, and the same scuffed work boots he had worn all week. He carried a plain manila folder in his right hand. He walked slowly through the crowd of employees. The day shift cashiers rolled their eyes and stepped out of his way, annoyed that the night cleaner was brushing past them. Marcus ignored them. He walked straight to the front of the room, stopping directly across from Julian and Chloe. Chloe let out a loud theatrical groan of pure annoyance. Mark, what on earth are you doing in here? This is a mandatory corporate staff meeting. It is not a sanitation briefing. Go wait out in the alley or go scrub the bathrooms. You are in the way. Julian stepped forward, puffing his chest out, trying to project total dominance. You heard the store manager. Get out of this room. You do not have the clearance to be part of a regional administrative lockdown. Marcus did not move. He did not blink. He just stood there looking at Julian with a terrifying, absolute stillness. The silence in the room began to stretch. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that makes people shift uncomfortably on their feet. The annoyed murmurs of the staff slowly died down. Something was wrong. The air in the room felt incredibly heavy, as if the gravity had suddenly shifted. When Marcus finally spoke, the quiet, raspy voice of the tired cleaner was entirely gone. In its place was a voice made of pure, unshakable authority. The deep, resonant voice of a man who commanded thousands of people and billions of dollars. Yo, did this homeless guy really just walk in here like he owns the place? Chloe froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. Marcus kept his eyes locked perfectly on hers. He recited the words slowly, letting every single syllable hit her like a physical blow. Get a plain roll and go sit on the pavement where you belong. Marcus continued, his voice dropping an octave, echoing off the stainless steel walls. Dude looks like he slept in an alley. I bet that $20 bill is fake. The color drained from Chloe's face so fast, she looked like she was going to pass out. Her manicured hands started to tremble. She recognized the words. She recognized the exact tone. She stared at the man in the faded jacket, her eyes frantically searching his face, realizing with a sudden, sickening wave of absolute terror that the old man she had humiliated was standing right in front of her. Julian looked back and forth between Chloe and the cleaner, completely confused. Chloe, what is he talking about? Who is this guy? Marcus slowly reached up and pulled the cheap beanie off his head. He unzipped the faded winter jacket and let it drop to the floor, revealing a crisp, dark dress shirt underneath. He stood up to his full height, rolling his shoulders back. The transformation was instant and terrifying. He no longer looked like a man who mopped floors. He looked like a king standing in a room full of thieves. My name is Marcus Thorne, he said. The name hit the room like a bomb. Several employees in the back row physically gasped. Someone dropped a metal mixing bowl. It clattered loudly against the floor, but nobody moved to pick it up. I am the founder, the sole owner, and the chief executive officer of Lumina Bakehouse, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the dead silence. I built this entire company from nothing. I welded the first pastry cart in my garage, and 25 years ago, I built this exact flagship store with the very same flour-stained hands that you just told to go scrub a bathroom. Julian physically stumbled backward. His expensive leather shoes squeaked loudly against the tile. His mouth opened, but his brain completely short-circuited. The arrogant, charismatic regional director was suddenly reduced to a trembling, pale shadow. He had been stealing from the company for years, and the billionaire CEO had been standing in the same room the entire time, holding a mop and watching him do it. Mr. Thorne, Julian stammered, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched squeak. Sir, I had no idea. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared a proper tour. There has been a massive misunderstanding here. There is no misunderstanding, Julian, Marcus said, his voice cold and flat. He held up the plain manila folder. I have spent the last 4 nights scrubbing your floors. I have listened to every word you said when you thought nobody important was listening. I have seen exactly how you run my company in the dark. Marcus turned his gaze back to Chloe. She was backed up against the prep table, tears of pure panic welling in her eyes. The arrogant queen of the bakery was completely shattered. And you, Marcus said, stepping 1 pace closer to her, you took a bakery that was built to welcome everyone, and you turned it into a cruel, exclusive country club. You threw a tray of beautiful food onto the floor just to break the spirit of a girl who works 10 times harder than you ever will. Marcus looked past the trembling managers. He looked to the very back of the room, straight at the exhausted girl sitting on the milk crate. Maya, Marcus said softly, the harsh steel in his voice melting into genuine warmth. Please come to the front. Maya stood up on shaking legs. The crowd of day shift employees instantly parted for her, stepping back as if she were royalty. She walked slowly to the front of the room, her flour-dusted apron serving as a badge of honor next to Julian's expensive, useless suit. Marcus looked at the two executives trembling before him. He opened the manila folder. The trap had been sprung. Now it was time to drop the hammer. Marcus opened the plain manila folder. He did not pull out a laptop. He did not project a screen. He simply pulled out 3 pieces of paper, holding them up one by one, so every single person in the room could see exactly how the rot had spread. Item 1. Marcus said, his voice ringing with absolute clarity. He held up a color photograph of the bright pink laminated card. The aesthetic guidelines, a physical list kept by the register detailing exactly how to abuse, ignore, and discard any customer who did not look wealthy enough to fit into Chloe's personal vision of this bakery. Elderly veterans, tired construction workers, frightened mothers, all categorized as trash, written in the handwriting of the store manager. A collective gasp rippled through the back rows. Several of the daytime employees looked down at their shoes, ashamed. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut. The first tear finally spilled over, ruining her perfect makeup. Item 2. Marcus continued, his voice devoid of any pity. He pulled out a printed spreadsheet. The quarterly bonus ledger. For the past 18 months, the $12,000 production bonus meant for the night crew was manually recoded as an administrative reward. Chloe, you and your 2 lead cashiers stole every single dime of the money generated by the girl standing next to me, using it to fund your designer lunches while she struggled to pay her mother's hospital bills. Julian wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. He took a tiny step backward, edging toward the heavy metal door. Marcus, sir, Julian whispered, his voice shaking uncontrollably. I can explain the bonus structure. It was an accounting error. I did not oversee the store-level distribution. Marcus turned his gaze to Julian. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Do not insult my intelligence, Julian, Marcus said smoothly, because item 3 is yours. Marcus held up 2 photographs side by side. On the left was a printout of Julian's prestigious National Fall menu presentation. On the right was a photograph of the grease-stained handwritten pages of Maya's leather notebook. Brown butter base, toasted cardamom, smoked sea salt on the top crest. Marcus recited perfectly, watching Julian's chest heave with panic. The autumn maple croissant, the salted caramel brioche crown, the lemon lavender tart. 52 original recipes submitted to corporate under your name, earning you massive bonuses and a path to the vice president chair. You did not just steal her money, Julian. You stole her genius. And when she tried to ask for credit, you threatened to destroy her career. Julian opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The polished, arrogant executive was gone, replaced by a terrified man caught in a trap he had built himself. He looked around the room, hoping to find a single sympathetic face among the staff, but no one looked away. The employees who had feared him, the ones who had laughed at his jokes to keep their jobs, stared back at him with pure disgust. Marcus closed the folder and let it rest on the stainless steel table. Chloe, Marcus said, his tone turning into the final heavy strike of a gavel. You are terminated effective immediately, not just for creating a toxic environment, but for gross violation of human decency. The legal team is waiting in the front cafe. You will hand over your keys and you will never set foot in a Lumina Bakehouse again. Chloe let out a loud, pathetic sob. She covered her face with her manicured hands and rushed past Marcus, pushing through the metal door to face the corporate security team waiting outside. The room was perfectly silent as the door clicked shut behind her. Marcus turned to the regional director. Julian was shaking so hard, his expensive watch rattled against his wrist. Julian, Marcus said softly, but the words carried the weight of a freight train. You are terminated effective immediately. For intellectual property theft, wage manipulation, and blatant nepotism for shielding your cousin. But your punishment does not end at the door. Our corporate legal team has already contacted the authorities regarding the stolen bonus funds. You will be facing severe civil charges for fraud. Julian's knees buckled slightly. He reached out to grab the edge of the prep table to keep himself from collapsing onto the tile floor. Marcus, please. Julian begged, his voice completely broken. I spent 10 years building my career in this industry. If you press charges, I will lose everything. I will be ruined. Marcus looked at the man who had mercilessly threatened a tired, desperate girl just 24 hours ago. You should have thought about the aesthetic, Marcus replied coldly. Julian lowered his head in utter defeat. He turned around, his shoulders slumped, and walked slowly toward the back door, stepping out into the freezing alley alone. There was no severance package. There was no graceful exit. just the absolute ruin he had earned. The heavy metal door swung shut. The two architects of the cruelty were gone. Marcus stood at the front of the room, looking out at the remaining 18 employees. The air was still thick with shock, but the oppressive, suffocating weight that had choked the bakery for 2 years was finally lifting. "What happened in this store," Marcus said, addressing the entire room, "was a failure of a system that I built. I let the numbers blind me to the human cost. That stops today. Effective immediately, all tips and bonuses will be tracked through a transparent digital pool. No manager will ever touch your money again. An independent HR hotline reporting directly to my personal office has been established. If anyone tries to silence you, I will hear about it." He let the words sink in. He saw the relief washing over the faces of the staff. Then Marcus turned to his right. Maya was still standing next to him. She was crying, but for the first time in years, the tears were not from exhaustion or fear. They were tears of absolute, overwhelming relief. The heavy chain around her neck had finally been snapped. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his dark dress shirt. He pulled out a thick, heavy envelope. "Maya," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a gentle, respectful hum. "I am sorry that I was not here to protect you. I am sorry that you had to bear the weight of this company in the dark. But you are not going to hide in the dark anymore." He handed her the envelope. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her flour-covered wrist and took it. Her hands were shaking as she opened the flap. Inside was a formal corporate letterhead, a shiny new brass name tag, and a cashier check with a number so large it made her gasp out loud. It was not just the 18 months of stolen bonus pay. It was a massive royalty check for the 52 original recipes that had made the company millions. Enough money to pay off her mother's hospital bills entirely, with plenty left over to breathe freely. Maya pulled out the brass name tag. She traced the engraved letters with her thumb. It did not say night baker. It did not say prep staff. It read Maya Lin, Regional Director of Culinary Innovation. "Your recipes belong to you," Marcus told her in front of everyone. "Your name will be printed next to every single pastry you created on every menu across the country. And starting Monday, you are moving to the corporate test kitchen on the 40th floor. You are going to teach the executives how to bake." Maya looked up at the billionaire who had scrubbed floors beside her. She could not speak. The emotion was too large, too heavy to put into words. She simply nodded, clutching the heavy envelope to her chest, a radiant, beautiful smile breaking through the tears and the flour. The room erupted. The day shift employees, the dishwashers, the baristas, all of them started clapping. It was not polite applause. It was genuine, thunderous cheering for the quiet hero who had finally been given the light she deserved. The oven of justice had burned away the rot, and the true heart of Lumina Bakehouse was finally ready to shine. 3 months later, the freezing winds of Chicago had faded into a warm, bright spring morning. The brass letters above the door of the Lumina Bakehouse flagship gleamed beautifully in the sun, the scent of warmth for every home. Inside, the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of the exclusive club was completely gone. The bright pink laminated aesthetic card was a thing of the past. In its place was a massive hand-painted chalkboard hanging directly above the front register. It listed the seasonal menu, but with one incredibly important change. Next to every single signature item was a name. The Autumn Maple Croissant, created by Maya Lin. The Salted Caramel Brioche Crown, created by Maya Lin. Right in the center of the cafe, sitting safely under a polished glass display case, was a worn, grease-stained leather notebook. It was open to a beautiful hand-drawn pencil sketch of a seasonal tart. A small brass plaque beneath the glass read, "The True Heart of Lumina Bakehouse." The crowd inside the bakery finally looked like the real city. A group of tired construction workers in high-visibility vests laughed loudly at a table next to 2 corporate executives in tailored suits. A young mother bought her little boy a massive chocolate brioche handed to her with a bright, genuine smile by the new store manager. No one was rushed out. No one was hidden. At exactly 7:15 in the morning, the brass bell above the door chimed. Arthur walked in. He wore the exact same faded olive green military jacket and scuffed boots. He stepped toward the counter, looking a little hesitant, bracing himself for the cold shoulder he used to receive. The new cashier looked up immediately, her eyes bright and welcoming. "Good morning, Arthur," she said warmly, holding a paper cup with both hands. A black coffee and a fresh maple croissant to start the day. Arthur blinked, taken aback. A wide, genuine smile slowly broke across his weathered face. It was the beautiful sound of a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be expected somewhere. "Yes, please," Arthur said, his raspy voice full of warmth. "That sounds absolutely wonderful." He took his food and walked over to the large table right by the front window, the best seat in the house, the exact table Chloe had sworn he did not deserve. Sitting quietly in the corner of the room, wearing a crisp, tailored suit, was Marcus Thorne. He took a sip of his coffee and watched the front door open once more. Maya Lin walked in. She was not covered in flour. She did not have heavy, dark circles under her eyes. She wore a pristine white chef coat with her new title, Regional Director of Culinary Innovation, embroidered in gold thread across the chest. She was carrying a sleek silver box of new flavor concepts straight from the corporate test kitchen on the 40th floor. She paused, looking across the busy, vibrant room. She saw Arthur enjoying his pastry in the sunlight. Then she looked at Marcus. They shared a quiet, knowing nod. It was not the nod of an employee to a CEO. It was the nod of two bakers who knew the real value of hard work and the absolute importance of standing up for it. Marcus finished his coffee, left a $20 bill in the transparent team tip jar, and walked out into the warm sun. His bakery was finally home again. Maya spent 3 years creating recipes worth millions and never saw her name on a single one. She filed complaints that died on the desks of the very men stealing from her, but they could not break her. They took her money, buried her name, and locked her in the dark shift, but she still showed up. She still poured her soul into the dough because they only had power over her schedule, never over her true worth. And the moment someone finally actually looked, their entire house of cards collapsed in a single morning. You can hide the truth in the shadows, but you can never kill it. So let me ask you, and I want you to really sit with this. When was the last time someone decided exactly who you were before you even opened your mouth? And the harder question, have you ever been one of the people standing in line, watching the cruelty happen, and saying absolutely nothing? Your story matters. Tell it in the comments below. If this story hit you, leave a like so more people can see it. Hit subscribe to see what happens the next time a boss goes undercover to clean house. Everyone deserves a piece of the warmth. Do not ever be the one trying to take it away. I will see you in the next one.